A DEXA scanner is essentially a total body low energy X-ray scan that looks at 3 different types of tissue: bone, fat, and a category known as other, which we consider that lean mass, which is your muscle, water, and vital organs. It gives you a composite score based on the different aspects of the analysis that it's looking at. It's looking at body fat, visceral fat, lean muscle mass, and it also looks at bone mineral densities. The good news about visceral fat is it's metabolically active, and you can get rid of visceral fat with diet and exercise.
We're rolling. What's up, Jerry? How you doing, man?
Doing great.
Doing
Pleasure
great.
to be here.
Pleasure to have you, man. So you moved in to, how long have you been in Northwest Arkansas?
Since 2017, we moved here from
2017.
Washington State. Yep.
Whereabouts in Washington?
Bellevue.
Bellevue.
Yeah,
I
beautiful.
don't know if I knew that. We were in Spokane for a while.
Yep. That's the other part of the state.
Other part, yeah.
Yeah, it has different
it's
attributes.
Like totally different states almost.
That's right.
But you miss Bellevue at all?
I miss the beauty and just the natural wonder of the area. It's very congested. It's growing just like other places, but I definitely miss the beauty of the nature. Nature is just astounding.
What brought you to Arkansas initially?
So my mother moved here in 2005, and so that was our original connection to Arkansas. And then when I retired from the Navy in 2017, we moved here. And just, I'm an only child. I have the only grandchild, and so having been in the military for all those years, I felt it was probably appropriate to be next to my mother at some point in my adult life. So we moved here, and that's how we got to Arkansas.
It's a little different than Bellevue, but Arkansas's got some natural beauty for sure.
Absolutely. It's a little more spread out. Not as many people. Mountains aren't as tall, but it still has a lot of natural wonder. Absolutely.
What did you do when you first got to Arkansas? Because you only recently opened up the Dexafit. So what were you doing here initially?
So we moved here, and I used my GI Bill to go back to college, and I studied exercise science at the University of Arkansas. And then I did some graduate work at Liberty University in exercise. And during the time I was at Liberty is when COVID hit. And so I initially was hoping to do something in cardiac rehab as a physiologist. But I couldn't get an internship during that time because everything was shut down. And so I ended up changing some of my graduate work to deal more with athletes, strength and conditioning, that sort of thing. So I finished all of that and started working as a personal trainer here in Northwest Arkansas at various gyms. And it wasn't until maybe about a year ago that I considered doing something like this. One of my personal training clients, we struck up a conversation about some physiology and all things training, and I had mentioned this to him, and so we started talking about it, and I started to reconsider maybe looking into some type of exercise testing, that sort of thing, and thought, well, how much does this equipment cost now? It'd been a few years since I had checked on these things, and the first piece of equipment that I considered was the DEXA scanner, obviously the most expensive piece of equipment I was considering. And just through a Google search, I saw Dexafit, and I was thinking, oh, well, I haven't seen this before. So I looked at it and looked at some of the services they were offering, and foremost, where are these places at? Because there wasn't anything around Arkansas.
Nothing around Arkansas.
Exactly. So, some of the closest locations were in Kansas City and St. Louis. And so I thought, there might be an opportunity here. So I called the company and asked them if they would consider supporting a site in Arkansas. Of course, they said yes. And so I put in a business plan, and 6, 7, 8 months later, here we are. And we've been open about 10 weeks, and pretty good reception. The people that have come in are excited. There's never been anything like this in this area, certainly. So we're just excited to be able to bring some of these services to Arkansas proper, certainly Northwest Arkansas, but Arkansas proper. You've come in and
man, you've been a game changer for me, because prior to y'all opening, there's a DEXA location at Baptist Hospital in Little Rock, but they're not Dexafit oriented at all. It's just a DEXA scan. So I would go there. I went there throughout my entire prep, but it's like a 3-hour drive for me. And then the only other option that's beyond that was, I think, in Oklahoma City or Missouri or somewhere I was going. I went there once, but that was also like 2.5 hour drive. So, I mean, y'all are 20 minutes down the road from me. So
Right.
you've got the Dexafit, you've got the resting metabolic rate, you've got the 3D imaging scan, you've got the VO2 max. So you got it all in one spot, 20 minutes down the road. So it's
Right.
been, yeah, we're going to be good friends my next prep
Right.
for sure. I'll be there frequently.
You know, DEXA's generally been in, let's say, hospital settings, radiology departments, exercise research centers, that sort of thing, weight loss centers. So mostly in the traditional medical confines of the medical buildings or whatnot. So what makes Dexafit a little bit unique is the accessibility to the general public to clinical grade analysis, be it bone mineral density or body composition, and all the analysis that comes along with that with this particular type of technology. And so that's where it gets a little bit exciting. You know, for bodybuilders, you guys know about DEXA. I mean, because it's the gold standard for analysis of body composition and whatnot. But for the layperson who maybe they've heard about it, or they'd heard about DEXA, or they knew someone that knew about DEXA. And so now what we're seeing are people trying to find out if they can get this service around here. You know, maybe they follow someone on YouTube or some influencer or some podcast that may address DEXA in one form or another. And folks are just going online and finding, oh, Farmington, Arkansas. Isn't that interesting? There's a DEXA scanner in Farmington, Arkansas. So we're excited about that. The lion's share of the folks who are coming in are people who are just seeking. You know, it has nothing to do with, let's say, our social media efforts, interestingly, but more so they're just finding out about the information on their own in some way and coming in. And we're excited about that too. We'll take them. Yeah.
I mean, it's, I'm just surprised that it hadn't opened up prior to you. I guess you were the visionary that saw it, but like there's so much demand, I would think, in this part of the state for there not to be a location to do this. I mean, you came at the right time.
I understand there may have been some inquiries about this type of service from some other folks in the area, but it never transpired, and for whatever reason, I don't know. But that was the word that was given to me when I tried to do something.
Is
with
there
DEXA.
a DEXA at the university for like studies and stuff? But that's not open to the public at all, right?
I think they do have some type of service. I'm not sure exactly what their access model is, but they do have one. I remember seeing it.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a DEXA scanner. You know, back in the day.
Well, I'm glad you opened up for sure, man. And for me, it's cool because like when I was going to Baptist, you know, since they're not part of the Dexafit umbrella, like nothing's ever digitized. It's all just a printout, and it doesn't sync with an app or anything. So like I've got all these printouts from, you know, years, but it's nowhere digital. So like now I can have it all in one spot, and I can kind of look from one prep to the next, changes in body comp, which is going to be super insightful for me.
Right. So one of the things that we offer is not only do we do the testing, but we do the on-site consultation right on the spot. So whatever testing you do, we get all that data, and I pipe it up on a big screen TV, and we look at the data, and I explain what it says, kind of what it means for you, maybe some next steps, things to consider, maybe some modifications to consider. But what's interesting, like you were saying about the digitization, is if you, for instance, since you're coming to me for your DEXA scans, I have access to every scan, and I can see all of your trends in all of the different aspects of your analysis on the spot. I mean, we can just go back and forth between the different types of, you know, whether it's lean muscle mass or visceral fat or you name it. We can just look instantaneously in a visual format, which makes it a little more valuable for you conceptually, you know, to see some of these things.
And I feel like for the general population, you know, like I'm a bodybuilder, so I'm like getting into the granular details of everything all the time. But like the general population, most of them don't even have a bathroom scale. And if they do, it's like a pretty cheap bioelectrical impedance scale. It's estimating their upper body based off their lower body. So it's not really giving them accurate feedback more often than not. But like seeing it visually where you can, you know, partition what body region is holding the most fat, what's your lean mass doing over time, what's your bone density doing over time. Like I feel like people that aren't even in the bodybuilding space, but just trying to be healthy and live a vibrant life, like that makes it tangible for them.
Right. You know, a lot of the aspects of the analysis that we offer are aspects that people have never had access to. You know, it's only through clinical grade testing can you see some of these types of attributes about your body, and people are excited even when the numbers don't look good, even when they, you know, they see the numbers and they know full well they expected something like that, but even when they see them, they get excited mostly because there's clarity, there's no more guesswork. It allows them to establish a true foundation simply because the analysis is accurate, and it's looking at aspects of their physiology, their morphology, if you will, that they've never been able to see before. Like you said, you know, when's the last time someone knew what their right-left lean muscle symmetry looked like for their arms? I mean, obviously there are people who definitely want to know these things, bodybuilders and this, that, and the other, but most people who have never seen these types of numbers or analyses, they get excited even when the numbers aren't good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's empowering because it gives them, like, if you've got a goal as to where you want to get, you have to really know where you're starting from. And that's like an old cliche that we all have heard and know to be true, but it's like people are totally shooting in the dark because they have no idea what their resting metabolic rate, they have no idea how much lean tissue they're carrying on their frame, they have no idea what their maintenance caloric intake is based off their activity. So they're just totally shooting in the dark, whereas this makes it all very material for them. You've got my DEXA pulled up. Let's just kind of go through. Can you also pull up like, not right now, but like, can you also have access to like the 3D imaging scan and all that on there?
Not on this interface. That's in a different interface.
Different app.
Actually, that's on your app.
Yeah.
I think you have your app. It's on your app.
We can pull that up too.
Yeah, sure. But, we can totally look at that.
Let's just dive into the DEXA. And for people that are not familiar with DEXA scans, like just use this as an opportunity to kind of enlighten them as to what all this information provides and kind of what actionable feedback they can take as a result of having this information.
Sure. So a DEXA scanner is essentially a total body low energy X-ray scan that looks at 3 different types of tissue. It looks at bone, fat, and a category known as other, which we consider that lean mass, which is your muscle, water, and vital organs.
Hair and everything, pretty much. It
really doesn't pick up the hair. It doesn't really, I don't think that it does that.
So if I grow my hair, I'm not going to have more muscle?
No, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I don't think it does that. But that's what DEXA is looking at. So under the analysis, it gives you a composite score based on the different aspects of the analysis that it's looking at. It's looking at body fat, visceral fat, lean muscle mass, and it also looks at bone mineral density. So based on your age and gender and what these numbers look like, it's essentially grading you on that as a total composite score. So in your case, you did well. Each time you've come in, you've had an A or A+.
And this one was taken June of this year.
June of this year was when you came in.
So I'm in full-blown building phase right now, not dieting down for a show or anything. So 14.5 body fat in a build is pretty much where I'm trying to be. So that's good. You know,
your body fat was 14.5%. You had basically 26 pounds of body fat total.
Nice.
Total. So, you know, that number alone, it's actually telling you the total amount of fat, not just as a percentage, but as weight, like how many pounds. So that's a number that can be tracked. You know, as you know, your fat percentage can change a lot of different reasons. You know, maybe you have more muscle mass, that sort of thing. But you can actually track the fat as well as far as the number.
Which is in and of itself key for people that are just only looking at the total weight on the scale. It's like, well, you know, you need to kind of know what that composition is, not just weight.
That's where it becomes more valuable for an individual. But, you know, also, you know, in your case, you know, we looked at visceral fat, which is the fat that's inside your body cavity. You know, it's what's considered the bad type of fat. You know, it can release
around the organs.
Stuff. It's on the other side of your abdominal wall. It's inside your body cavity. You know, that type of fat, in a lot of ways, kind of acts like its own organ. It can release hormones. It can release chemical messengers that cause inflammation systemically or locally. It's just not a type of fat that's beneficial to you over the long haul. The good news about visceral fat is it's metabolically active, and you can get rid of visceral fat, with diet and exercise and that sort of thing. Low stress, low cortisol, that sort of thing.
How does measuring visceral fat via DEXA compare to via MRI imaging?
I actually don't know. I'm not familiar with the MRI modality per se, but
because I haven't done that test yet, but I've got a colleague that does MRI for visceral fat, so I want to kind of do both and see, but it's more expensive, cost prohibitive for sure.
Absolutely. And I don't know of any radiology department that would let someone come in, I want to see what my visceral fat level is. Not today. We have too many other high priority patients ahead of the line. But what makes the DEXA interesting is it's just accessible. It's a cheap test overall compared to something like an MRI, but it definitely looks at the visceral fat also, which is something that separates DEXA from a lot of other analysis.
So I'm in the fair category on the visceral?
Fair. I think, if we look back in time, you've had better results.
Kind of depends on whether or not I'm in a prep or not, probably.
Yeah, true. But, that's certainly visceral fat is something that you don't want to have a lot of. You want that to be very low.
Yeah, makes total sense.
And then we also have the lean mass analysis where we can see compositionally what percent of your body is lean mass. But we can also take a look at how many pounds of lean mass you have. So interestingly, barring any surgery where your vital organs are removed, that changes to this number, or essentially muscle and water, so that's a number you can track over time. So if you want to see if you're actually putting on muscle, I can track that. For sure.
And you can do it by body part region too, which is nice.
That's right. We can look at various regions of the body, the trunk, the arms, the legs.
Do I have more lean mass in my arms than Greg?
I'd have to look. I don't know about that. He's just off a show. I don't know. We'll see about that. But more importantly, with the lean mass analysis, now we can consider symmetry, right-left symmetry, which is important for a lot of reasons. Obviously, there's the aesthetic aspect, but more importantly, just biomechanical movement and injury prevention, things like that. You want to be symmetrical in your movements, certainly. An interesting thing that DEXA does is it does this analysis called the appendicular lean mass index. And what this is essentially your lean mass in your extremities, your arms and your legs, converted to kilograms, divided by your height in meters squared. And it essentially gives you a muscular index number. And what they found is if you score really high in this, you generally have a better lifespan and less chronic disease burden over your lifespan.
So this is kind of like a much better version of a BMI test.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Because I'm always obese in BMI calculation.
And this is, we're only dealing with lean tissue. So this would be muscle and water in the extremities. And it only makes sense. I mean, just looking at it at the 30,000 foot level, if someone has a lot of muscle in their legs, they typically have pretty good mobility.
Yeah.
Or if they have a lot of muscle in their arm, they can carry things. They generally wouldn't be limited in their movement patterns unless they had some sort of pain or something like that. But it's an excellent analysis to look to see how much muscle you have on your frame for your height. Well, what we know is we want that number to be high because as we age, we're going to lose that anyway. So we want you to be what I like to call the top of the mountain, the top of the mountain, so that as you age at from a high number, so that you're much further away from, loss of muscle, sarcopenia or any type of frailty issues later in life, certainly in your senior years. So if you can keep this number high, that's more indicative of a much more vibrant health span. Absolutely.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to get this data as I get older and older, for sure. Like, I don't know when I'll retire from competing, if I retire, but like I think of my grandparents, for instance, who are just not using their muscles and therefore there's significant atrophy taking place. And when you start going downhill, you start going downhill quick. So to be able to have this to kind of like measure against year to year as you age would be super helpful.
Right. DEXA also looks at bone mineral density. It's one of the main reasons it was developed. And we can actually do a comparison to your peer group, your sex, your age group, and how you shake down compared to other folks' bone mineral density in your class. So I give this number. The technical way to look at this is standard deviations above the mean. If you look at a bell curve, the top of the bell curve would be 0. To the right of the bell curve would be a positive number, which is where you want to be in comparison on this analysis. And you were 0.4 standard deviations. So you were on your way down the bell curve on the right side of the bell curve, which is the good side.
Good.
If you were negative 0.4, that's not as good.
Right.
That means that your bone mineral density would be much less than the.
And on the DEXA
average.
peer group analysis, that's based off of everybody that uses DEXA
That's ever been on the machine, right, in the world. Yeah.
So there's probably even a little bit of a healthy user bias in that, I would think, because more often than not, people that are using the DEXAs are interested in probably healthy to some extent, or at least trying to be relative to the general standard American diet population.
Well, the other flip side of that would be, if someone's getting DEXA for bone mineral density, maybe it's because they're at risk or they have symptoms, or they're exhibiting symptoms of, osteopenia or osteoporosis, some type of bone pathology. So that might balance out.
Yeah,
I'm not exactly sure how that pans out, but what we do know is the population that you're being compared against is large enough to make an assessment for sure, without a doubt.
Very cool. I like any other worthwhile things touching on as far as the DEXA is concerned.
It also tells you how much your bones weigh,
which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
6.3 pounds.
Yeah, I always ask folks before the number comes up, hey, how much do you think your bones weigh? And they always say 30 pounds, 40 pounds.
Yeah.
And then when I show them the number, they're, it's astounding. It's astounding. It's amazing what that skeleton can do.
Yeah. What blows my mind is the people that are carrying way too much weight. They're still carrying all that weight on the same skeletal frame that a person of healthy weight is carrying. So that's asking so much more of that skeletal structure than a healthy individual. It's there's no such thing as, they're just big bone. It's no, they're just obese and they're putting all that taxation on their bones.
Certainly on the joints.
Yeah.
The joints, knees and ankles and hips, certainly for that. But it is an interesting thing about DEXA that, nobody knows what their bones weigh. And so that's just a fun way of looking at the analysis.
What's the highest number you've seen there for the weight of bones?
Oh, well, I've had some tall gentlemen that interestingly had very good bone mineral density. I think it was, 8.4.
It's still single digits though. Nothing.
Yeah. I actually don't know what the highest is, but eight's a lot.
Yeah.
Eight's a lot. That's 20% more than you.
It is crazy because I think about the weights, I'm pulling with a deadlift or a squat, I'm loading my skeletal structure with 400 plus pounds, and the bones that are moving that are structure that's less than 10 pounds. It's crazy.
Yeah. The bones allow a place for muscle attachment, and so, the torque that you put on bones has a lot to do with the health of the bone. That's why weightlifting is really good for your bones. It gives you that essential strain on the bone that is necessary for growth. But yeah, it's amazing that the skeleton, it's very hollow actually. It's in a lot of ways very porous, obviously, because we know what in your case, 6.3 pounds, we know what a 6-pound dumbbell weighs.
Not much at all.
So imagine, you've got your skeleton over one shoulder and you got it's amazing how light it actually is in comparison to its functionality.
Yeah, that's wild. Wild. What else we got as far as DEXA? Anything else worth touching on?
No, I think that's it. It's the main areas are for body composition.
It's super non-invasive scan.
It takes
lay on the machine.
Takes anywhere from 4 to 7 minutes based on how large you are. As far as your total mass, the scan goes faster if you're smaller, but about anywhere from 4 to 7 minutes, maybe 8 minutes tops. And it's very quick. It's like laying down on a tanning bed, except I've got a little cushion there instead of hard plastic. It's very quick, and it's very easy, very easy.
Nice. Is there, like when people are doing DEXA scans, like on a regular basis, is there a length of time to optimally try and have a scan between, like how much time ideally between scans to get measurable changes?
Well, depending on what you're trying to look at, are you looking at body fat? Are you looking at lean mass?
Because like when I'm in a prep, if I'm, losing body fat at a pretty aggressive rate, like that all shows for sure. But if I'm in a building phase, naturally it takes so much time to build muscle. Like if I'm getting a scan every few months, like it probably would make sense to have a longer time interval between.
Yeah, depending on how closely you want to try to monitor the results and how closely you want to see the trend lines, and to determine whether or not your training type, what type of training you're doing is giving you the effect. That a lot of that has to do with the periodicity of the exam. Let's say you're doing a 6-month workup for a show. I mean, you do your baseline probably every couple of months, come in and just have a sense of your trend line. And, because you get excited when you see the trend lines, you get excited. And so I always recommend that's a good reason to be scanned, is to see the trend lines. But I think about every couple of months or so. And in your case, if you were doing a show prep, that would be totally fine.
Yeah.
For the general lay person who just comes in because they want to know a DEXA and their numbers look relatively good, I don't know, maybe every year would be sufficient. If their visceral fat's really high, I'd like to see them come in a little sooner than that, just to see if what they're doing as their intervention is working. I don't want them to wait a year and then say, hey, whatever you were doing, that didn't work. I'd rather them not have to wait that long. I'd rather be able to see some improvements.
I feel like if you're manipulating a lot of things, like trying to change your diet, change your training, like 6 months minimum makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
And then like for me in a prep, I'd probably do it like every month because.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously if you have something close by and it's accessible and affordable, more frequently is it makes it valuable, certainly for trend line analysis and to really dial things in to say,
Totally.
hey, this is exactly where I'm at with everything. So that's probably what I'd recommend.
Do you have my RMR, or is that on a separate app as well?
I do have your RMR.
Because we did that, and that test was interesting because basically I just sat in a chair for 15 minutes, breathing casually, and it was like, talk about RMR. So what is that calculating?
So the resting metabolic rate is a test. It's a resting test, obviously. I've got you in a Chase lounge chair. I've got you hooked into a gas analysis machine, the metabolic cart, and I've got you breathing through a tube. It takes about, like you said, usually between 15 and 20 minutes. And what it's doing, it's taking a sampling of your breathing, your gases that you're exhaling, carbon dioxide and oxygen, and essentially extrapolating what your metabolic rate is from that. The resting metabolic rate is the rate where you're awake, alert, and not moving.
So not the same as basal metabolic rate. Right. That'd be like if you're in a coma.
Basal would be your sleeping, basically. Yeah, life-sustaining metabolic activity.
And a lot of people...
Which is usually less than that.
Right, yeah. And they make the negative assumption, like they'll get they'll plug in their height and weight and age into like a generic macro calculator online, and it'll calculate their estimated BMR, and then it'll say 1,200 calories or something for females as an example, and they'll just assume that's what they should be consuming on a daily basis if their goal is to lose weight. But like you said, that's not accounting for any expenditure throughout the day, which is not a healthy caloric intake.
Right. So, the mathematical calculations, it's a starting point, certainly. But where the test comes into play is I'm actually directly measuring metabolic activity right then, right, as far as what your conditioning level is, what your level of activity actually is right now. And so that becomes very accurate.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of reasons to have a resting metabolic rate number. Certainly if someone's on a weight loss journey and they want to dial in, they really want to have the essence of what kind of caloric intake is required, that would be a reason to have it. Or let's say you're an athlete and you definitely want your metabolic rate high because that's more indicative of an increase in conditioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want your metabolic rate to be high because that's your idle speed. You want your idle speed to be much higher, So if that's going up, that's maybe a clue that maybe your muscle mass is going up because that's where most of your calories are being burned, is in the muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Or the metabolic machinery inside the muscle, let's say it's the same size, but the metabolic machinery inside the muscle is much more robust, much more active, which we like that. That could be indicative of a higher resting metabolic rate. But we definitely want the number to not be going down.
Yeah.
We definitely don't want that. So,
and the higher the metabolic rate, the more food you can consume and quote unquote get away with. So that's
true,
a plus too.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of ways to use a resting metabolic rate. Some folks may use that resting rate as the calorie intake level for the day, and then they allow their physical activity to create a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do that. The other thing you can do is you can take your resting rate and then you can add in any of your physical activity, your sessions. If you have a wearable, you can add those caloric contributions to the resting rate, and that gives you a sense of what your daily requirement might be. But it definitely takes a lot of the guesswork out of the caloric burn that makes up most of your caloric burn in the day.
Totally.
The more sedentary you are, the more the resting metabolic rate matches your total.
Right.
But the more active you are, certainly your physical activity takes away some of that.
So what were my results here? I'd been a while since we did this test. So this was the 1836 resting metabolic rate. So pretty much if I'm just chilling on the computer all day working on emails.
Yeah.
More or less.
Certainly if you're sitting around working on astrophysics or some high level intellectual activity, you do burn a little more sugar in the brain. But in essence, your test was basically where it predicted mathematically, also based on equation. And I expected, you and I are about the same height. You've got more muscle than I do. So I would expect your resting metabolic rate to be higher than mine. And that's true, certainly, with the number that we see there, the 1836, 1,836 calories per day.
And when I'm doing a calculation online, it's pretty close to that. And I know from years of tracking that my true maintenance intake based off of my activity levels is typically around 3,000 calories. So I'm on average burning an additional 1,200 calories just from the day-to-day activity to maintain weight, if that's my resting metabolic rate.
Yeah. But as I was saying, the resting metabolic rate allows you to have a little more clarity in your idle speed, if you will. And, that's a number that most people would never normally get that measured directly. So that's where we come in, is we offer that analysis.
Totally. Now, for this one, we were sitting in a lounge chair, taking it easy, listening to some chill music. But when I went in the other day for a VO2 max, that was not the case. I wasn't just taking it easy on that one.
No,
you don't have that on your screen though, right?
I do have your VO2, but I don't have your metabolic profile that we talked about earlier.
Let's pull up what you've got here.
I've got we had you at 55 milliliters per kilogram per minute.
And for context, I don't do any cardiovascular training. I mean, I just started kind of post this test. So I expect that to be better the next time we test. But what is this measuring exactly? What can we glean from this? How do people implement it in their training? Just give us the rundown on VO2.
So VO2 max is a maximal cardiorespiratory fitness test. We do it on the treadmill. I've got you hooked up with a mask on, and we're analyzing your exhalations into this gas analyzer. What the VO2 max test does is it measures your body's ability to use oxygen to make energy, essentially, right? So for instance, we know how much oxygen's in the air. The machine can figure that out, but it also analyzes how much oxygen you're breathing out, right? Which is much less than what's in the air because your body used some of that. And so what we're measuring is the maximum difference between what's in the air and what you exhale, right? And so that's what you've consumed metabolically. And so we're measuring that. And in your case, and it's based on your weight, and we kind of make it a relative number based on your weight, and it's milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. So when we do the test, it's actually sampling about every 15 seconds. So you did pretty good. That's a pretty good number. I
Googled it afterwards.
That's a good number.
And it was something like I was in the upper 94th percentile of people in my age group and sex or something like that.
You have your printout that we looked at. On the front page, it actually categorized your fitness level. What does it say?
Superior.
Of course. No, that's really good.
I have to stick that on the fridge.
Yeah. And again, that VO2 number, just like with the muscle mass number, we want the VO2 number to be high.
Yeah.
It's considered a vital sign in a lot of circles, certainly in cardiology. It's been talked about as vital signs. We know that if you have a high VO2, you typically live longer. That's true. I mean, I don't think that's in question.
Yeah.
You can actually raise your VO2 through training, obviously, different types of training modalities. You lose VO2 over time as you age, just like we lose everything else. We lose our eyesight, we lose our hearing, we lose our muscles, we lose coordination, we lose cardiorespiratory capacity. But in the cardiorespiratory capacity area, that has a lot to do with your ability to negotiate the rigors of life, do physical activities, work out or go for a walk, or you name the activity that requires oxygen, which everything does. Those are things that over time become much more limited for you. And so we want to be able to maintain as much vitality with our movements and with our activities. So VO2 is something that we can measure. I can categorize your fitness level, and it's something that we can track over time. If you get another test, let's say you decide to take up running as part of your training block, I expect that to actually be higher.
And the way you conducted the test is like we established a baseline, like jog, then like fast walk, then a jog, and then once we established our speed, I think it was like 6 miles an hour for me, we just started increasing the grade every minute, I believe.
Right. So we started you out just as a slow walk, and over the course of about 5 or 6 minutes, I slowly got you up to your testing speed, which would be your testing speed. And in your case, it was 6 miles per hour on the treadmill. And then after that, every minute, I increased the treadmill grade by 1%. And so what we're doing is we're increasing the workload gradually, and we're essentially maxing out your oxygen
use capacity.
Yeah, oxygen use capacity, and forcing you to transition between different energy systems in the muscle, to the point where you're basically transitioning away from burning fat, which is the substrate that's typically used at low intensities, and I artificially force you to transition to using more carbohydrates later in the protocol, until the point where you tap out. And so for you, I think we got you up to what, 10% grade? It was
I think we were like at
12% grade.
Yeah, we went up there, man.
Okay, I'll have to remember that. I'll have to go back and look. Well, let's see. Yeah. So that's probably true.
Because I've got...
That's pretty steep. Actually, 12% is quite a
moving
quite
on
a
up there. And this is why a lot of people train like heart rate style training. Like they'll try and pick a zone and stay in that zone depending on what their goals are, which is something I've never done previously. Like I don't do a ton of cardio, but like when I'm in a fat loss phase, like I've never paid 2 minds to what my heart rate is or train based off of a zone heart rate calculation.
Right. Think of heart rate as an indicator of workload. So it's directly proportional to your workload. So the higher your heart rate, the more work you're doing, the more taxing it is on your body, if you will. So what was interesting in your case is because of your ketogenic diet, I was interested to see
let's pull that up. So if you'll like pull your screen down.
Yeah, let me pull it out.
And then.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know why mine's not maximized though. There we go. And you can see that on your end, Chip?
I can actually plug that into the thing.
Okay, so you're getting the full picture there. So before we dive into mine, which is mine right here, let's look at a typical scan. And you sent me a few. This is just the first one.
Right.
But even the other ones you sent.
This is textbook. This is pretty much textbook.
And this individual looks like 51 years old, male, but you sent me some that were closer in age to me, and it's pretty similar layout exactly.
They all kind of look the same. Yep.
Walk us through what we're seeing here.
So what we see here is an effective fat burn chart where each column is 1 minute of the protocol, and that black area is the caloric contribution of fat, and the brown or the tan is the caloric contribution of carbohydrates or sugar. And so what we see is over the course of this protocol, as the workload goes up, your fat burning machinery in the cell, in the mitochondria is being able to keep up with a lot of the workload. You still have a little bit of sugar burn underneath that, which you see that a lot. But notice as the workload starts to go up, your body starts to rely less and less on fat and more on carbohydrate. It does that for a lot of different reasons. We know that you can get energy from carbohydrate much more faster and more efficiently over a short period of time than you can fat. And so your body generally wants to transition to that. The other thing too, to look at this is you have increases in adrenaline, right? As something gets harder and more stressful, you get more adrenaline into the bloodstream, and that actually can cause the breakdown of sugar more quickly in the liver. And so you get a little more sugar out there available to you. It also, you have what's known as muscle type transition, muscle fiber type transition.
Like type 1, type 2.
Type 1 is kind of your aerobic fat burning style muscle tissue. And then the type 2 is more of the carbohydrate loving or fast twitch muscle. And so as you increase in intensity, you get that transition away from type 1 and more type 2. So what you see is a push towards carbohydrate metabolism, and then eventually that just kind of takes over.
Yeah.
Because your body just says, you know what? I just can't do the fat anymore. We're just going to do carbohydrate because that's the road you want to go down. We're going to use carbohydrates going out. So everybody,
when you're at peak capacity, I mean, your liver and your muscles are dumping all stored glycogen, and that's just what's getting used.
Yeah, that's whatever's in the muscle. You certainly already have stuff in the muscle, and then what's in the bloodstream, and then what gets kicked out from the liver. But all roads lead to a very tall brown column. I get everybody there, and it's just interesting to see that that's where it goes. But in your guys' case,
pull over to mine here.
It was very fascinating.
So this is what being keto for a decade plus results in.
I actually didn't expect it to look like that. I was fascinated to see that from your heart rate from 85 beats per minute to really, close to 120 beats per minute, you were almost using zero sugar. I couldn't believe that.
And honestly, it didn't start, carbohydrate didn't exceed fat until I was pretty much 161, 167.
Right.
As a heart rate. So
which is a high heart rate. That's a high heart rate.
That's I'd go on trail runs, and that's a pretty good clip on a trail run. So it didn't, when I'm typically just trained, unless I'm all out sprinting, I'm predominantly fat metabolism, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely that's the case here. The predominance of fat in this profile is profound. It's interesting, the crossover point for you is like what you said, the crossover point being the point where the caloric contribution of fat and carbohydrates is about the same.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the 161 is kind of where the average heart rate was at that point. But what's interesting about fat metabolism versus carbohydrate metabolism, we know that lactate, that comes from carbohydrate metabolism, not fat metabolism. So, when you're burning a lot of sugar very quickly, you can accumulate the lactate, and that's where things start to unravel.
And this is literally why I never get sore. Like, I train every single day. I never get sore, especially with like weight training. I'm typically not going super high on my heart rate, but I'm never having this lactate threshold being met. So I don't ever get that lactate burn, which is interesting.
But it's very fascinating to see the predominance of fat metabolism during the course of this protocol. I mean, 2/3, almost 3/4 of your protocol was fat. Mm-hmm. I'd never seen that.
I would love to have gotten this test like the first year I started doing keto and see how it compares to now having done it for over a decade. Because I would assume that the deeper levels of adaptation I'm in, that fat predominant metabolism source of energy is just elongated. But I'll have to do this again to see. But when I think of this from an efficacious standpoint for athletes, like if you're deeply fat adapted, then you're able to tap into a much larger fuel reserve because you've got much more stored fat than you can store in glucose in your liver and muscles. So if you're not having to rely on what is stored in glucose for much longer than your peer group or competitors, then you've got a much larger lasting reserve of fuel. So like this, I think, is very efficacious for endurance athletes as well. Because most like endurance sports, like unless you're going all out sprinting, like you can be, like in my case, I mean, I can be jogging at 150 heart rate for a long time. And that whole time I'm predominantly using fat, So
if you look at the difference between the energy currency that one molecule of glucose provides you versus one molecule of, let's say, palmitic acid fat, palmitic acid fat can give you 2.5 times as much ATP energy just in one molecule. So like you said, that reserve, there's so much more energy packed into a fat molecule that we can grab onto. If you have the machinery to do it, it's there.
If you have the machinery,
if you have the factories, if you have enough factories online to get yourself into that fat molecule and do it efficiently, it's almost unlimited in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
If you have the machinery to do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we see here is it was a good test. I was impressed.
Yeah,
Even Greg was impressed.
Yeah, it was cool, man. And Greg's profile looked very similar to mine. I mean, we both had that elongated fat metabolism.
I think he had a different protocol. And I can't remember if you guys did the exact same protocol.
I think his was like fast walking and then a slight jog, and mine was a slow jog to more of a faster jog or something.
But what was
like
interesting is the essence of your profile were very similar. That was we definitely garnished that from the analysis. Is that your ketogenic diet is producing a particular type of profile, at least between you two guys.
Yeah.
If we were to analyze 25 of you, if I had a conga line of VO2 max test for ketogenic athletes, because I don't have a lot of, you two were the only ones I've tested that were ketogenic. So I don't have a lot of experience with that. That's why it was fascinating to see how different the profile was compared to even runners.
Yeah.
Even runners.
Because a runner, I mean, I don't know what this individual's activity levels are like, but I mean, this is textbok, you say, right? Like this is pretty much what...
You see the rising fat, and then it just really tapers off fairly quickly, usually in, anywhere from a heart rate to 145 to 150 in a lot of people, based on conditioning level. But moving forward after that, there's no fat, almost none. But you guys carried it out much further, and it was much more robust along the way. So those columns are much higher in their caloric contribution across most of the protocol, which is fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting, man. It definitely kind of piqued my interest in just diving deeper into heart rate training, VO2 max specifically. So I'm much more cognizant of it now. I'll start implementing it more.
And just as an aside, for bodybuilders who are viewing and watching this, if you're more aerobically fit, you're more quickly able to recover between sets. I don't think anybody would deny that. And just in general, your ability to negotiate hard training sessions, it only helps if you have all this extra energy pumping in there. I certainly recommend that folks don't overlook the aerobic side of their training.
Yeah, I've never overlooked it, but in like the bodybuilding, powerlifting space especially, there's like no attention paid towards it whatsoever. And you think about it, like if you're trying to maximize hypertrophy and strength for like squat, for instance, but if you're gassed after a few reps of squat, then you're leaving muscle building potential on the table because you could potentially do more reps, train more frequently if you were in better cardiovascular shape. You can't really take it for granted.
Yeah, I think, certainly you'd have a little more flexibility with changing your training volume. You'd be able to negotiate that certainly in a lot of ways. With the power lifters, that's a different energy system also. We haven't talked about that one, but that's a different type of training, certainly, and a different type of bioenergetic aspect of weightlifting, certainly.
Yeah, I just want to be harder to kill, man, all over. I want to be just lethal from a strength standpoint, a cardiovascular conditioning standpoint, and just healthy. Like I feel like as human beings, we should be able to, have some basic benchmarks, like be able to pull up our own body weight, be able to just on a whim run a mile without fail, like just little things like that we should all be capable of doing.
So the services we provide in Dexafit, all services, if you combine all the services that we have, the analysis wants you to be good at everything, just like you said. It wants you to be a hybrid. It wants you to be lean. It wants you to be muscular. It wants you to have really good bones, no visceral fat. It wants you to be able to run, and it wants you to have a high metabolic rate. I mean, so the analysis is grading you against what it sees as the perfect hybrid, if you will. And so that's what you're up against when you do these tests. It's grading you against where you should probably be for your age to ensure that you have the longevity and the lifespan that you'd like to have.
There was one, I think it may have been on your app for my DEXA. It's like biological age.
Yes.
Is that basically measuring against peer group at a given age? Like what the consensus is there?
So it's taking into account the questionnaire that you fill out before you come in, your pre-test questionnaire. It takes into account, are you a smoker? Are you this? Are you that? But then it also, more importantly, takes into account any testing that you do. It feeds all that information into that calculation and gives you a biological age, which is different than your chronological age, which is your calendar age.
Right.
Your biological age takes into consideration what you appear to be by analysis.
I think it said mine is 22 years old or something.
Was that right? I couldn't remember how low it was.
I'm in my prime, man.
Let me see. Let me see what it was.
I think it was
24.
24.
Now,
all right.
I will say that's not the best chronological age, biological age difference I've seen.
Yeah.
I've seen 18 years.
For somebody that was how old?
I want to say they were in their upper 50s.
Wow. That's crazy.
Or mid 50s.
That's impressive.
Which was pretty good.
Yeah.
I've had some young, early 20 or mid 20 runners, and they were 11.
Wow.
So
you get a lot of people where their biological age is much older than their chronological age?
I've had a few. They were aghast by it. I had an older gentleman who was 13 years biologically older than his actual age. So we talked about it, and I explained what was basically creating that disparity. But he's on the right track.
That'd be a good motivating factor, though, for sure.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah,
I would hope so.
Lit a fire under
It's
him.
basically it's a clock.
Yeah.
It's saying this is kind of where you seem to be based on analysis. And so physiologically, all the aspects, all the attributes that we look at, in a composite way. How old are you, essentially? Which is, I think I actually like that part of the analysis.
It
my
just
analysis
makes it tangible for people.
Yeah, I'm a little younger than my age, which I like that too. And I want to keep, once you know that, you want to keep that.
Right.
It's an interesting thing. When you first get the app and you download the app and you pull up your DEXA scan for the first time, or your biological age, the default number that comes up in the software is 88. But you have to, you refresh
I saw that.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, man, I'm going backwards.
I had a lady almost fall out. She couldn't believe it. But I said, oh no, just refresh the app. And she was so relieved to know that she was
not 88,
25 or whatever it was. So that was an interesting, and I always forget to tell people that. Don't look at that 88. It's not real.
Yeah. You got to refresh it. Well, you're doing us a solid, man. You're, not only are you a platinum sponsor for our competition in September, but you're hosting a super generous 2-day open house for anybody coming in and involved with the show at all, like competitors, which is a great time to get a DEXA scan, but like attendees, registrants, volunteer, anybody involved, you're hooking them up with half price on DEXA and a full free 3D imaging scan, which is, we didn't even talk about that, but that's super cool. You stand on a platform and this camera does a 360 around you. And it's all, facial recognition. So anytime you test there going forward, it does like heat mapping to show where you've gained, where you've lost, estimates visceral fat, body fat, lean tissue, all that stuff. And it's pretty, it looks just like it's kind of trippy.
So my goal was to provide a way for bodybuilders in their peak condition to see most accurately where their composition truly is at their best. I think you guys should know that.
100%.
I just feel like that's a number you should know as a competitor.
And a lot of competitors are kind of delusional. Like they think they're 6% body fat, whereas in reality they may actually be like 12% body fat. Getting a DEXA scan when you're that lean is like the real telltale sign.
Right. So you get the DEXA scan and you get the body comp analysis. And then if you marry that up with a 3D scan, now you get the external photographic side of it that does an estimation of all of your circumferences and your 3-dimensional volume. Right? So it's a 3-dimensional analysis, whereas DEXA is a 2-dimensional analysis. But, putting those two together, it gives you a wealth of information. And like you said, if you have changes in your circumferences over time, you can compare scan to scan, and then it generates what's known as a heat map, like you were saying, where it's color-coded, and it tells you where you've lost and where you've gained all on one image simultaneously. So it's giving you a snapshot of all the changes that have happened over the course of, let's say, 30 days or 60 days or whatever scan periodicity you want to look at. And so that gets exciting, because what's more motivating than to know, oh, I lost inches off my waist. Oh, my shoulders got 3 millimeters larger, or you name it. It's very accurate. So I certainly would want them to have that 3D scan just as a way of seeing their body in a different way. Certainly with the, looking at the morphology, but then with the DEXA, looking at the actual makeup, your compositional makeup. I think the two of those together, that's the winning combination for bodybuilders, certainly.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you here close and local, man. Like truly, when I do my next prep, like I'll be there on a monthly basis documenting, because I document everything anyways, but to be able to have it all digitally with the same equipment every time, where I can control all the environmental factors and be consistent, is going to be a game changer.
The other thing to consider too is, because of the accuracy of the DEXA, if you come in over the course of, even during your training block or your prep block, whatever, or certainly right before your show, you can truly evaluate objectively how effective your training was. Now, obviously, people are effective at losing body fat and doing wonders to their body over the course of a training block. But if you wanted to evaluate maybe a different modification that you've made, and how effective was that in a certain amount of time, Did that timeline work out the way you thought it was going to? So there's a lot of variables that an individual who does shows or fitness prep or whatever, they can use that information in a lot of different ways to objectively evaluate what they've done.
Yeah.
And to say, oh, okay, you know, that really worked well for me. Or wow, I didn't expect that. That's great. Or wow, my my shoulders or my calves or you name it. You can look at that stuff objectively, certainly when you're at your peak condition, and to evaluate your training.
And if you marry that up with, taking somewhat consistent progress photos, you've got that objective data as well, which we're pretty good about doing here. And then you're also tracking your intake so that okay, if I'm looking at my DEXA scan and I see that I've lost body fat or I've gained body fat, totally independent of total scale weight, what's the composition changes looking like? But then you can look at that, transpose it over, what's my intake been like? Am I eating too many calories, not enough calories, more protein, less protein, more carbohydrates? It's it just takes the guesswork out of things. You can be very objective with the feedback you're getting and then make an informed decision going forward.
And my hope is that competitors will begin to integrate this type of clinical grade testing, certainly DEXA, into their training, into their thinking as far as knowing their body, following their progress or no progress.
Mm-hmm.
You can, there's a lot of ways to look at it. But my hope is that now that we're available in Arkansas, that, regional competitors will consider us as a place to give them a little more clarity, a little more understanding about the exact nature of their composition.
Yeah.
And certainly if you've never used DEXA as part of your analysis, you just got to come in. At this point, you got to come in.
I'm hooked, man. No, I've been doing DEXAs for years, but having all of the stuff you offer in one spot right in my backyard, I'm super pleased. And I'm super grateful for you and glad that we connected in the first place, man. This has been nothing but positive.
No, I like all you guys coming in. You guys are like guinea pigs. I like seeing all this new ketogenic stuff. I'm going to have to learn a little more about it myself.
Yeah.
I'm definitely perplexed by this. So
I'm
happy to have all you guys come in. Bodybuilders, runners, cyclists, enthusiasts, you name it. You guys are all welcome, and we'll talk about it. Part of my service is we unpack it all.
Yeah.
And we tell you what the numbers say. And
I'm gonna get my brother to jump on. He's skinny, but not. He doesn't lift. He doesn't eat the right food. So I want to get him on that. I want to get him full blown lab panels done too, so he can just see the actual numbers and hopefully make better decisions.
Well, we're available. We're open.
100%, man. What's the website?
nwa.dexafit.com. nwa.dexafit.com. It's all by appointment only. You're the only person there. When you come in, it's just me and you.
White glove service, man.
It's VIP, start to finish.
VIP. And you're going to have a booth at the show too, so people can meet you there in person as well.
I'll be there and come by and see me. If you haven't already seen me at the open house, just come by and chat, and we'll talk all things analysis. We'll talk all things.
I love it. Well, Jerry, truly a pleasure, man. You're doing a good service for people here in Northwest Arkansas, but all over. And if we can get the state, I think Arkansas is the second most unhealthy state. I think Mississippi's got a speed.
West Virginia is in there too.
West Virginia's in there too.
So Arkansas that's not a good place to be.
Not a good place.
I'd like for us not to be there.
Yeah. Well, you're fighting the good fight and tipping that turn the other way for sure. So keep doing it, brother.
Pleasure.
Appreciate you, Jay.
Absolutely.
All right. That's a wrap, Chip.